Ice Age is directed by Chris Wedge, written by Michael J. Wilson, Michael Berg, and Peter Ackerman, and features the voices of Ray Romano, John Leguizamo, Dennis Leary, and Goran Vishnich. And Ice Age sees Manfred the Mammoth, voiced by Ray Romano, and Sid the Sloth, voiced by John Leguizamo, attempting to return a human baby to his family during the onset of the Ice Age, while a saber-toothed tiger named Diego, played by Dennis Leary, tries to get the baby for himself. I remember back in the day when this movie came out, like, people really loved the first Ice Age. I watched it when I was like 8 years old back then in 2002, and I watched it multiple times, and I remember it even won an Oscar. Well, it didn't win an Oscar, it got nominated for an Oscar for Best Animated Feature. You know, people really like this movie, and it's a shame because see where the Ice Age franchise has gone now. And rewatching this movie again, it still does mostly hold up. It has some really great voice acting, a great soundtrack, although it is kind of held back by some weak storytelling. Let's talk about some of the voice actors first. First, Ray Romano gives a legitimately great performance here as Manny the Mammoth. You can just feel from the moment he steps on screen, even if they don't really flesh out his character until later on in the movie, he has a lot of pent-up frustration and pain that Ray Romano really is able to bring to the surface, which is really impressive given that, you know, I expected him to be doing his usual shtick from Everybody Loves Raymond, but he's actually pretty different here. And John Leguizamo might be annoying now as Sid, but back then I didn't really find him annoying. He was actually kind of endearing, you know, like John Leguizamo is kind of like the main comic relief character in this movie, but he also is able to give Sid a lot of charm, like in an impish way. By the end of the movie, you really see him as sort of like an underdog. He's not totally incompetent, and you just really root for him. And Dennis Leary as Diego has a really cool, like, badass type voice, but he's more than that, you know, he's really able to sell Diego's surprisingly emotional arc. And what's so cool is that these three voices are so vastly different that you don't really expect them to work together, but the chemistry among these three actors really is great. And what I love so much about this first Ice Age movie is that the characters are actually layered and worth caring about. You know, Sid has like kind of like his small arc, but Manny's arc is definitely very emotional, and Diego's arc is very impressive as well. And by the ending, it really feels like there's one big family that's kind of like learned to love each other. And this movie is funny, man. Like, maybe not as laugh out loud funny as some of like the better animated comedies out there, but it's definitely very consistently funny, especially like the dodo scene, like that still makes me laugh up to today. And we have to talk about the music in the first Ice Age as well, because like it has a really offbeat musical score from David Newman that I really love because it perfectly captures just how bizarre a group of characters these three protagonists are. And there are some truly great musical moments throughout the movie, chief of which is the usage of the song Send Me On My Way by Rusted Root. Pause this video, look up that song because it is a great song. It's one of my favorite like early 2000s songs that really captures that road trip vibe. And for a road trip movie, the runtime of the first Ice Age is actually really lean at only an hour 20 minutes. But the pace is even throughout, and there's a lot of great comedic timing in the editing by John Carnochan, and the way this movie is edited also makes it feel really like an ensemble piece because the story is told from the points of view of all three characters. Unfortunately though, despite all this good stuff, like the visuals in Ice Age haven't really aged that well. This movie came out like 14 years ago, and even then, like compared to the other animated films that came out in 2002, like a lot of the textures in the first Ice Age look really flat. A lot of the character animations are kind of stiff, especially with the humans. But I think the film does still manage to overcome some of these shortcomings by relying on a lot of visual gags and a lot of slapstick humor, which you might love, you might hate, but it does take your mind off of the realism or lack thereof in the animation. However, unfortunately, some of the stiff animation is kind of made somewhat worse by Chris Wedge's somewhat mediocre direction of the action. There's no real suspense or excitement or creativity to the face-offs between these characters. However, to his credit, there are a lot of funny bits and there are some dramatic bits that are really emotional. Primary example is the cave drawing scene. This scene happens like in the last 30 minutes of the movie, and it is just so powerful because nothing is said, and it's done mostly in like traditional animation because it's a cave drawing, and it just, you know, with no words and with these simple drawings, you learn so much about Manny, and it changes everything from that point forward. You know, it changes how Diego feels about the entire thing, and it really kind of elevates the movie to a higher level. You know, the entire movie leading up to this point is kind of okay, but this moment is so special to me, and it's just really effective that it really makes it memorable and worth going back to just almost solely because of the scene. So it is kind of unfortunate that there's not a whole lot of plot in Ice Age. You know, you start to tell after a while that there's a lot of slapstick stuff because they're trying to mask the fact that there's not much of a story going on, which is okay, but at the beginning, you know, the motivations that Manny and Sid are given to go on this adventure are really unconvincing. Like, it just sounds really, really strange coming from them. But I still do think that the first Ice Age is a pretty good movie. I think it's absolutely worth checking back to, especially with how the series has turned out now. It's still, you know, worth keeping this movie in your memory. Alright, so those are my thoughts on the first Ice Age. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.